What is up, guys? Frosty Austy 0232 here again for another Frosty Features. Today we have another member of the Invaders team coming to Marvel Strike Force, and it is James Montgomery Falsworth, aka Union Jack number 1. If you haven't seen this before, what this is a comic book background on the toons that you use in Marvel Strike Force. We mainly stick to Marvel 616 canon, and with Union Jack, we are sticking entirely to it. So, let's get going. According to Scopely, Lord James Montgomery Falsworth was recruited by the British Army to become one of the first public superheroes, Union Jack. He was given a guise that would strike terror in enemy hearts and appear as a personification of the British national flag. He fought valiantly alongside heroes like Iron Fist during World War II, and his daughter was saved from a Nazi-allied monster by one of the invaders. Falsworth invited the Invaders team to his home, where Falsworth revealed to his family that he was the hero, Union Jack. Falsworth agreed to join the Invaders to help them win the war. So, we're going to come back around to the accuracy of this, but this is Union Jack. Union Jack, name James Montgomery Falsworth. He is a landowner and a lord of the UK, right? So he is just kind of big deal socially and politically. Yes, first appearance Invaders number 7 in 1976. Note that he is not from the 40s when World War II took place, and he is not in any of the original stories that you see Cap and people taking part in, but yes, came along in the 70s and was written back in. Power/abilities, he's got none. Really, he's just he's a dude in a suit, and he's highly trained. Namely, he just fights people a lot, and he's good at hand-to-hand combat. Aliases, no duel. He's Union Jack. So one thing I want to point out right now as we go through this, throughout this video, I'm going to talk about what I believe is the entire history of Union Jack number 1. He's not in much, right? And what he is in, it's very short. There's not much to him, right? I feel like a lot of the MSF community knows that by now, but if you haven't heard it, here it is. He's not around a lot. There's more than one Union Jack is the important part. Affiliations, Invaders and Freedoms 5. He also was part of the army for the United Kingdom. But namely, as far as notable super teams or big team-ups, the Invaders and Freedoms 5. Background, his manor is in Dimehurst, England, which is north of London and totally doesn't exist in the real world, but in Marvel 616, it is there, and that's where he's at. And yes, he let the Invaders use his manor as a base of operations in World War II. Who died? His wife. So, I'm going to go through a very specific kind of version of history as far as Union Jack is concerned here in a moment. So he becomes Union Jack in World War I. Ultimately, he ends up carrying over to World War II, and in 1941, during the Blitz on the UK by the Nazis, his wife is volunteering in a hospital and is killed in the crossfire, but this does not cause him to become Union Jack. He's already Union Jack. It just kind of happens, and that's something that he has to suffer. Again, mainly operated in World War I. So this is actually really important. By the end of World War II, Union Jack is not Union Jack. There is a second Union Jack by the end of World War II, and this Union Jack actually stops operating in 1942, which is before the war ends. But unlike Iron Fist World War II, at least he had something to do with World War II at all, right? So that's pretty important to kind of take into consideration, just due to the fact that as far as Iron Fist World War II, who had pretty much nothing to do with World War II other than doing lots of drugs and hiding in a den, Union Jack at least had something to do with World War II, but really wasn't active in it. Honestly, World War I. Yeah. And actually, oddly enough, wasn't actually really a part of the Invaders, and we'll talk about that in a minute. A legacy hero, kind of. So a legacy hero, for anyone that doesn't know, is it is a mantle that is taken up by somebody, essentially a father figure, who takes a ward or has a kid and passes it down to the next person. So with Union Jack, it gets a little crazy, because not really crazy. It's very simple. There's not much for Union Jack, any of them altogether, really, in that context of, you know, the just breadth of comic book work. But ultimately, it's Union Jack James Montgomery Fallsworth. He passes it to his son. His son dies in a car wreck, and so that's Union Jack 2. He's dead, 1953, dead, right? And then we're gonna talk about that a little bit more in detail, but he ages, and there's a thing we'll talk about, and a third person, Joseph Chapman, picks up the mantle, who has no relation to Union Jack whatsoever. He is his son-in-law's friend. Picks up the mantle of Union Jack. So we'll get into that a little bit, but he's a legacy hero, but the mantle's just sort of passed around and picked up, essentially, after Union Jack 2. So yes. Moving on, relationships. This is where it's really important, because like I said, he's not in much, so most of his story revolves around his family. And by most, I mean all. That I found, except one little side note. Relationships. William Fallsworth is his father. He's in one issue and he dies. John Fallsworth is his brother. John Fallsworth is Baron Blood, who is a very prominent Nazi vampire figure in comics. So a good way to look at it is Union Jack's arch rival is Baron Blood, but Baron Blood's arch rival probably isn't Union Jack, right? He fights like Namor and stuff a lot more than Union Jack, but his main story is tied to Union Jack. Yeah. So John Fallsworth, that's John Fallsworth, Baron Blood. Jane Fallsworth is his wife that dies in the Blitz, and then Brian and Jacqueline Fallsworth are his children, who are much, in my humble opinion, who are much more prolific than James. So Brian is the Destroyer, or Union Jack 2, and Jacqueline Fallsworth becomes Spitfire, who I didn't know who that was until I did the research for this one. Also, for context, as an avid comic book reader and a person that does these things like Frosty Features, where I talk about so much about the comics, I didn't know that much about Union Jack, almost none. Right? So all of this is stuff that I went back and read, and I've also done extra research on to try to fill this in. So in finding all the Union Jack stuff wasn't that hard, because it started in the 70s, so it's all available on things like Marvel Unlimited, and there's not that much of it, right? So what I'm going to give you is what I believe when I talk about notable events here. I'm just going to give you everything, right? Because it's not that long, okay? So this is the story of Union Jack, right? So when he becomes here, this is how we go, right? We talk about William Fallsworth for one second, because he's in one issue. John and James Fallsworth come of age. James is older. He gets the estate. John's pissed, so he leaves the family and he goes to Transylvania to hunt down Dracula in an attempt to gain his power, but instead just becomes a regular vampire, and that's all you hear from him for a while. James becomes this sort of big thing in politics and social life or whatever, and then he gets recruited by the UK government to become Union Jack. And so what he does is he's a saboteur that works behind lines, and he works on the front lines wearing the Union Jack just to inspire fear. And to put this into context, because I imagine this will be a little bit controversial later, he doesn't start training until he's a full-blown adult, right? He's a good hand-to-hand combatant, and as far as Union Jack 1 is concerned, that is it, okay? So, his brother went off, and so this is World War II. He's fighting on the front lines. And all he's doing is fighting Nazis. He's not fighting supervillains for the most part. He does join Freedom's 5, and this is the one thing that doesn't deal with his family. He joins the Freedom's 5, which are 5 representatives from different countries that kind of they appear superhuman or are superhuman. And he joins the Freedom's Five, and there is one situation where Martians attack and they fight the Martians, those go away, and that's it. As far as I could tell, that's Union Jack's thing outside of his family, and that's in World War One. So during World War One, there's a point where very important like British diplomats start getting assassinated and they're drained of blood, and Union Jack is recalled from the front lines to kind of take care of the situation, and he ends up finding out that this person seems like it's a vampire, and he fights him. He doesn't figure out who it is, and he doesn't actually catch him in World War One. So all that to say, while he's doing that, World War One ends, and much like Iron Fist World War II Orson Randall, check out Frosty Features Iron Fist World War II. He is disillusioned and he's very turned off by the violence that he sees in World War One, and he retires. He retires kind of quickly and immediately, and he decides he's going to become a family man. He gets married and he has kids, and World War II comes. World War II comes and he still doesn't do anything about it. Right? He's just living his family, being a family man, whatever. So, because I think this is really important, because in the invaders in Marvel Strike Force seem to have this like really big World War II vibe, but with Iron Fist World War II and Union Jack, they really don't have that much to do with World War II. So, James has two sons, which are Brian and Jacqueline. Brian is so there's this thing with British appeasement, and essentially in World War II, the British essentially let Germany expand at the beginning, and so James and Brian have this big argument on whether or not that's okay. And so Brian's like, no, it's fine, it's not a big deal, I'll show you. And him and Roger Aubrey, who is his, at first you think it's his friend, but they're actually lovers. They go to Germany, and then they have this picture taken with Adolf Hitler, and they're like, yeah, appeasement's fine. And then I think it's kind of a stick it to my old man type situation, which really makes James mad, and he kind of is like, well, you're not my son anymore, goodbye. And then as Roger and Brian are trying to leave Germany, they get caught by the guards there, and because they don't want them to leave and like change their opinion, so they keep them in Germany and they imprison them. So anyway, they get kind of taken out of the situation. Roger gets experimented on, and he becomes the villain / hero Dyna-mite. He's a 1 foot tall man with powers, and then due to some various things, Brian ends up getting a dose of a super soldier serum, not quite Captain America level, but close. He becomes a bit of a super soldier, and he goes under the alias of Destroyer. But for the most part, they're stuck in Germany, and James and everyone has them presumed dead. So there's that. Then comes 1941, where the death of Jane Fallsworth in the hospital happens. And we still don't see Union Jack come into action until 1942, when Jacqueline is kidnapped by Baron Blood, his brother, which he didn't know yet. She's kidnapped by Baron Blood. Baron Blood wants to kill her to make sure that everyone that is close to James is dead, to make him, hate himself, just to torture him as much as he can. But as she's kidnapped, Human Torch, Jim Hammond, the OG Human Torch, who's actually on the Invaders, swoops in and saves her. And so in this process, Union Jack more or less comes out of retirement. The Invaders are involved in rescuing her. So Union Jack comes out of retirement to help the Invaders one time, right? So does that an Invader make? I don't know. But the one time that James Fallsworth is associated with the Invaders is here, and it's to go and to take out Baron Blood. He decides that he's going to help the Invaders take out Baron Blood, and he helps the Invaders this one time. And so it all comes down to him versus Baron Blood, of course. And in the battle, Baron Blood picks up a boulder and throws it at Union Jack. As a reminder, ladies and gents, Union Jack does not have any powers and is immediately paralyzed by a boulder. But he happens to be able to get the boulder off of him and pushes it, and it rolls back to Baron Blood, knocks him sideways, and impales him on a stalagmite, killing him, right? So in this, Jacqueline, his daughter, so he's paralyzed. Jacqueline, his daughter, gets injured and needs a blood transfusion, and she gets it from Jim Hammond, and that's how she becomes Spitfire, which is pretty much, you know, insert random flame-powered person here. She's pretty much a Firestar, with the color scheme flipped, right? So she becomes Spitfire, who joins the Invaders, and once again, at this point, James Fallsworth, he retires the Union Jack situation. So then after that, he's no longer Union Jack, but he sticks with the Invaders because he has a superpowered daughter all of a sudden. Once again, sorry, I'm kind of going quickly. This is because, this is him in World War I, and then this is him fighting Baron Blood. So I'm going quickly because we're going to go through the whole thing. We're almost done, right? This is almost his entire story. So, after World War II's like ending, and so he sticks with the Invaders for a little while, and what happens here is he ends up finding Dyna-mite, who he immediately identifies as Roger Aubrey, which to his perspective is his son's friend, right? So he's brainwashed by the Nazis, and so their goal is to essentially unbrainwash Dyna-mite. And in the process, they actually get defeated and captured. Once again, Union Jack is now at this point a very weak regular guy, and he's not Union Jack, he's just John Fallsworth, and Spitfire, who's a superpowered fire lady. So anyway, they get captured by Nazis and then rescued by the Destroyer, who is James Fallsworth's son, Brian. And he's like, oh, Dad. And James is like, oh, son. And then they reconcile, and it's cool for a second. And then he's like, hey, son, do you want to be Union Jack? And his son's like, yeah, I want to be Union Jack. And then he becomes Union Jack. And this is the Union Jack who fights with the Invaders more. So the Invaders then use the Fallsworth Mansion for a base of operations. And Brian Fallsworth is the Union Jack that fights with the Invaders. Right? And he is a superhuman, right? So that's important to note. So on and on, the war ends. Brian's still working with the Invaders. 1953 comes around and he dies in a car crash. So then when he dies in a car crash, Roger Aubrey, who's no longer brainwashed by Nazis and he's trying to help, he's Dyna-mite. He approaches James and he's like, hey, Brian and I were lovers. I'm really strong. Can I be Union Jack? And James is like, my son can't be gay. No, you can't. Also, he's not my son anymore. Get out of my face. So Union Jack, more or less, we're going to say dies here. There's no Union Jack for a while. So yeah, and 1940s motifs, that's not that surprising. So anyway, James outlives his son by a lot. So a lot of time goes by, and as James is really old and he's decrepit and in a wheelchair or whatever, he is, a bunch of people start dying around his mansion. And so he starts telling everybody that Baron Blood, who everybody watched get impaled by a stalagmite, has come back and started killing people again. And everyone's like, you're a crazy old man, shut up. And he ends up reaching out to Captain America, who, is like, well, okay, I know you, I respect you, like, let me come look into this. And they get in, and sure enough, Baron Blood's back to life because comics. And so Captain America's like, all right, let's hop in on this. We'll use you as bait. And then that doesn't quite work. So then we have Joseph Chapman, who comes in dressed as Union Jack to use as bait, who is James Fallsworth's son-in-law's, who married Jacqueline. It's his friend, just some guy, really. Come in and be Union Jack 3. That actually works. Captain America versus Baron Blood. Captain America decapitates son. And so the reason why James Fallsworth, Union Jack, didn't work originally for the bait is when Baron Blood showed up, he had a heart attack because he was really old, right? So he's not doing super hot. Baron Blood is beheaded by Captain America, and then they're like, okay, to make sure he doesn't come back to life, we're gonna burn his body. And as his body's burning, James Fallsworth dies at the same time. Watching the body burn, he dies. That's the entire story of Union Jack. It's everything. I just told you everything that I know, that I've seen as of the recording of this date. I believe that is everything he's involved in. So there it is. That's the story of Union Jack. Welcome in. All that to say, Marvel Strike Force doesn't care about power levels, but here on Frosty Features, we do. So the way that this works, the way that this works is a multiversal power level means you are a threat to all of reality, not just your reality, but all the other realities that are potential. You can end the multiverse. Universal means you have the ability to end your reality, maybe hop over to another one and end that one too. Cosmic is a threat on a planetary scale. You can destroy something like a planetary body, maybe hop to another one, destroy another one, take out maybe a solar system or a small galaxy. Nuclear means you have power equal to that of a nuclear bomb. So that means the ability to level small cities, and with enough work and effort, maybe up to a planetary body. Yes. Super Soldier means that you are strong enough to level something like a brick wall, and therefore with enough time and effort that you could theoretically take out a city block. This is a very common situation in Marvel. The base being the Captain America. City level means that you are a peak human being that is trained to peak levels, and you are at the highest level a human being can possibly be without actually getting some sort of supplement. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that Hela spawns in Marvel Strike Force, and for the sake of argument, we are going to say that Greg is at human level, so in the event that I was armed with a long string and a lock tied to the end of it, I could theoretically take out a Greg. All this considered, and somebody has said it in chat, honestly, there is an argument made that Union Jack could be city level, but I say that Union Jack is our first Greg rated individual. Here's why. So even here where he's kicking Baron Blood in the face, he's admitting he's only able to beat up Baron Blood because it is daytime and the vampires in the Marvel world are in fact weaker during the day, right? So he can't even keep up with a base level vamp. Baron Blood is just a base level vampire. There's nothing's really that special about him. He can't keep up with him. The smallest level of Super Soldier can. He has to use his wits and things like that. And as far as highly trained people go, he only starts training after he's a full-grown man, whereas most of our city-level individuals were kidnapped as children and trained and treated with all this stuff, or have been doing it for years and years and years, whatever. This isn't the case for Union Jack. He's just sort of a guy that got recruited into the army and he was a saboteur and fighting on the front lines with a gun. So he is advanced in hand-to-hand combat, but he is not a master of anything. He's just some guy in a costume. So that's that. And that's the case, once again, only for Union Jack 1. There is a Super Soldier serum introduced for Union Jack 2, and 3 is kind of up for debate because I don't know much about him at all. So in the case of Union Jack, Frosty Osty, deem our first Greg level character in Marvel Strike Force since I've started this. According to Scopely, they didn't even try. They said very little, and they actually got a lot of it wrong, fighting with Iron Fist during World War II. Iron Fist didn't fight in World War II, so that's not even possible. They barely said anything about him, and they just really didn't dive into it whatsoever. So Scopely didn't even try with this character. There was quite a deep cut to bring out. There was other invaders and things like that to kind of go into, but we just didn't really seem interested in that. It's cool that he's come to the game. He's got a cool design, and it is a different character, but I believe I just gave you his entire background, so there it is. I hope you like this. If I missed something, there's always a chance that I missed something, y'all. I am not perfect. All this research came pretty much secondhand. I read very little about him before his announcement in Marvel Strike Force. If I missed something, let me know in the comments. I would love to know more about Union Jack. His whole family thing is really cool, and I'd like to see that kind of expand. So, you know, as of right now, as we stand here in 2023, that's what I believe is his entirety of his story. There are other Union Jacks. Brian's really fun to read into, Union Jack number 2, who is actually part of the Invaders. But at the end, Scopely didn't try. That's Frosty Features, Union Jack. I hope you liked it. Please like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel a lot. And also, I stream every Sunday, 8 a.m. at the link above, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where we record Frosty Features live. We record Frosty Features live. So yeah, please give us a follow, subscribe on YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks. And I hope that you all enjoyed the video. I hope you all have a fantastic, fantastic week. And most importantly, y'all, stay cool.